You are now listening to a podcast made in collaboration with the Copenhagen College Radio.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 81 of the Social Media and Politics podcast, bringing you expert insights into how social media is changing the political game. I'm your host, Michael Becerra, political scientist at the University of Copenhagen. Connect with us on Twitter at SMNP Podcast or visit us on the web at socialmediaandpolitics.org. All right, y'all. Thanks so much for tuning in. I am here with Dr. Anamaria Ducek-Segiston, a frequent guest on the pod. She is an assistant professor in European Studies at Lund University and the vice chair for the Center for European Studies at Lund University. Welcome, Dr. Ducek-Segiston, once again.
Thank you very much, and I'm so excited because I'm so European studies all over, so this is exactly my cup of tea. So we have to roll and discuss these exciting results.
Yes, so we are live at ICA 2019, the International Communication Association. It's our big conference every year. Right now it's in Washington, D.C. It's nighttime here, which means it's
almost morning in Europe. It's 5 a.m. Europe time. So some people are about to start their day as we're about to wrap up ours with these final thoughts on the election results, which just have been published on the European Parliament website.
Yeah, so we're sort of catching the results as they come in, but I think we have enough of a picture to make some statements. So this is kind of a live take of the election results, and obviously we'll be focusing on the results, implications for Europe, and then also the digital campaign, which is lines with the show's focus. So why don't we start out, I guess, with the
actual results.
The actual results. What is happening?
We have, again, these are not final results, just to be sure that nobody will question our numbers, but we've seen several party groups going up and several going down. And most interesting, let's start with the winners of this. The Greens and the Liberal, the ALDE group, ALDE expanded group. So these are the two groups in the European Parliament that have noticed the highest increase in membership. And who are the biggest losers?
That's an interesting question, I think.
If you look at the numbers, you would see that the traditional parties, the mainstream center parties, both on the right side, center right and center left, have lost almost a similar amount of mandates. The Social Democrats dropped 41 mandates and the European People's Party dropped 42.
Yeah, so these are the clear losers. I was thinking more about the populist, the so-called populist, the nationalist wave. Are they losers in this election or not?
I don't think they're losers, but definitely one of the things we can conclude already on the basis of these results is the misplaced fear on the part of the media, maybe of the general public, in a extreme rise of the extreme populist, nationalist, Eurosceptic wave to swipe all over the place in the European institutions. This is definitely not the case. As we're looking at right now, and not looking necessarily at party group affiliations, because this probably will change in comparison to the 2014 version of the European Parliament. The nationalist Eurosceptics, the more extreme Eurosceptics, come number 5 in the total number of seats. So definitely not, as Matteo Salvini, one of the leaders of this particular ideological orientation, was saying number 2 or number 3. They're actually below the expectations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's something I'm sure we'll pick apart as we move through the episode, which is, I think 2014 is when we really saw this media narrative pick up around the rise of the Eurosceptics, the rise of the populists, who are in many cases the same group, but I think we both have our concerns about the use of those terms from an academic standpoint. They don't quite hold up to academic scrutiny. But I think, again, 2019, it's the media narrative, right? That's what sells. People want to hear about the populists who, I think what the 2014 election showed is that while these groups that tend to hold these Eurosceptic opinions did have more electoral success than they had in the past, they couldn't coalesce into a party group at the European level. So I remember the big story was Nigel Farage and Marine Le Pen from the UK and France respectively couldn't coalesce into a group. They couldn't put aside their differences. You had Geert Wilders from the Netherlands, the PVV, trying to put them together, basically, and they couldn't come together. And I think that tells a really interesting story about the so-called rise of populism and the shared populist ideology could not coalesce into a party group in 2014.
And I think this is the interesting story to see unfolding. One of the differences may not lie in the number of mandates, which is pretty similar as it looks right now, but in the level of unity. And that at least has been promised as a key objective of Matteo Salvini, who is one of the leaders of these ideological movements. He is the party leader for the Northern League in Italy, and there the party definitely increased their popularity. They
won, right?
They won with 32% of the vote in Italy, so they are the number one party, and so that is the story that emerges from that discourse. Salvini has promised to unite all the European Eurosceptics in one party group called the Europe of, I'm having it down just so that I don't...
The ENF?
This is the current name, but they want to change it into something even more beautifully sounding, which I have misplaced. The European Alliance of Peoples and Nations. European Alliance of Peoples and Nations is this new Eurosceptic party group that should unite not only Salvini and Marine Le Pen from France, but also AfD, the Alternative for Germany, and the Finns Party in Finland, and the Danish People's Party.
I will say...
and some other smaller parties from Eastern Europe.
The European party groups, they have some interesting names.
Yeah, poetic, some of them, right?
Yeah, very...
some of them are difficult to pronounce. The Nordic Green Left is not always the easiest one. And this is interesting, apropos the extremes. This election cannot be described as a rise of the extremes, because while we see kind of a stabilization on the extreme right or the nationalist right, we don't see an increase on the left. So the more socialist, even anarchist leftists did not grow. On the contrary, they lost 14 mandates in comparison with the previous mandate.
Well, don't they kind of fold into the Greens a bit?
And this is the thing is, if you just look at the raw numbers by party and by country, you can see that there is maybe some growth in some countries and some decline in others. But party affiliation is the strategic choice, and there may be so that some parties that used to be on the green left can move into the mainstream Green Party. Again, and these are speculations that can only continue after the election results are confirmed.
I'm personally surprised at the rise of the Greens. For me, that's the most...
I'm not surprised at all. I'm not surprised because we have the Greta movement, the Greta effect.
The Swedish Asperger's teenager. Yeah.
Well, the most important part about her is that she mobilized quite a lot of support among the youth, even those who are not even able to vote. So you can probably predict this green trend to continue, since we have 15-year-old, 16-year-old on their way into politics that are mobilized on the green agenda. And so the Greta effect definitely showed there is an interest, a political interest in the climate change. And then we had the weather. The actual weather. Last summer was the warmest summer in Europe, even in northern parts, in the Nordic part of the continent, in Sweden, where I come from. There were a lot of wildfires. The temperatures were in their hundreds or 30 degrees Celsius, which is unprecedented for Scandinavia. So it became a more perceived in the daily life of everyday people that this climate change is no joke. We have tornadoes, we have very extreme weather phenomena all over the continent. I think this also increased the visibility of climate change as a political issue.
Yeah, you were talking about in a previous podcast on the Swedish elections how they were dropping bombs on the fires.
Yeah, my God, that was a funny way to deal with it. And already this year in Sweden, in Scandinavia, I think it was in early April, there were already wildfires. very unusual, very unusual. So basically, I'm not surprised that the Greens are coming up, and it's not an even process. It's also something that we need to be very clear when we discuss the pan-European trends. The Greens go super strong in Germany. They record their absolute best result in the history of the party. And I have the numbers right here. Apparently, if this is correct, 21% of the Germans supported the Greens. And that's a twice-fold increase from 2014. So that's a major success. It also goes super good for the Finnish Greens. That came number 2, like the second the most popular party with 16%. So that's also pretty cool. And in France, where they became the third party. So that's very nice. However, depending on how you look at it, in other settings, the Greens have not made such inroads. Mm-hmm. So it's not an evenly distributed success.
Well, it's still surprising to me that people put climate as their number one issue to vote on. And I think, as you're right, we're seeing that with a younger generation. We've talked about that a bit with Generation Z, and how they may not be interested so much in the nuts and bolts of economic policy, but they do care about the use of straws.
They're idealists.
Yeah, they are.
And I think there's another element that I think is playing up a little bit. The green success is the higher. The narrative now has a human form because we have this activist person, Greta Thunberg, that has
social media sensation.
Exactly, and so it's easier to relate to somebody. It's also more articulated. Now there is a very clear agenda, and probably this is, according to me, her most important merit: the fact that through her increased visibility, has formulated an agenda. We need to stop this. Everything must be done for this, and otherwise you'll be punished at the vote.
I can't but think, though, I know this is European Parliament elections, but I wonder to the extent to which Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the Green New Deal and that sort of push, which is a very diluted form of legislation, it's just more or less a promise to do more. But that really picked up traction.
You mean the Green New Deal, or
the Green New Deal? Yeah. It's really nothing but a piece of paper, but it went viral.
It increased the visibility of the climate question, even in the United States, which normally is not concerned. Like American voters don't often place climate change at the top of their agenda, and I don't think everybody does. But it's the youth, the liberal youth, that embrace that agenda. And I think that's interesting. I wanted to also say, like, sensationalist in terms of the Greens, Portugal got their first ever Green MEP, and I love the name of the party. It's called Pan, like, Pan, the god Pan.
Yeah, the flute player.
The flute player, and it's the initials of people, animals, nature. Pan, the Pan Party. I think it's, again, apropos names and their poetic value. This one probably wins in my book.
Definitely. So thinking about winners and losers, there is also perhaps a big winner or loser, depending on how you look at the voter turnout.
Yeah.
Which was probably will be the biggest story, I think. Well, at least for us that have been monitoring the turnout. What was the turnout figure?
50.95, almost 51%, over half of the European population. And again, I don't have in front of me numbers across the membership. According to a tweet from a Swedish journalist that I follow, it appears that across the 28 member states, the turnout was higher than in the 2014 elections, where it reached a rock bottom level. Slovakia in 2014,
42 point something.
Overall 42.9, I want to say. But one country in particular had 13.4% turnout. That was Slovakia. And the Czech Republic wasn't far from that number. And it seems that even in the eastern part of the continent, there seems to be an increase in voter turnout. So even for them, there is an increased salience of the European issue. And I think this is one of the main takeaways. Again, maybe it's too early to go there. But
I think we should hop right into it. And what explains that voter turnout? For me, there's two stories here. I know we've been talking a little bit about them. One is the campaigning by the European Parliament and some digital initiatives that I want to dive into a bit later. But then there's also, of course, the big B of Brexit.
We can't avoid the Brexit effect, and it's not a short-term effect. Since the Brexit discussions have started, since the media coverage increased, media coverage of European matters, since it became apparent through political discussions that the European Union actually does something, that the European Union actually matters. It's an invisible actor when things go okay, but when things start to be questioned or things are in motion and there may be some threat, you will miss it. It's an invisible actor which you don't care if it's there and everything is okay, but once you begin to worry about it, then you'll see it actually contributes something positive to the everyday life, and this, at least in the eyes of many people. So I think we see definitely a Brexit effect.
Yeah, I think there's studies that show, and I think the EU doesn't do a good enough job of promoting the positives of the EU, like when they changed the roaming fees. So
I think that was one of the best.
That was a push from them,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
But there's all these things, and there's some research that shows in the Brexit case, if you just expose, so in an experiment, if you expose people to positive news about the EU, they won't move from being pro-Brexit to remain, but they'll go from pro-Brexit to don't know. And I think what I'm kind of thinking out loud about is with the 2014 European Parliament elections, we saw this rise of the Eurosceptic narrative in the media. Maybe 5 years later, we're seeing a bit of a response to that, which is people get mobilized when they say, hey, I like the status quo. Things are...
Yes, exactly. I think it's simply the Brexit effect consists in a higher visibility, but also in an increased salience of the European Union at a conscious level. And visibility of European actors. I've also seen opinion polls on name recognition, and names like Jean-Claude Juncker or Donald Tusk or even Michel Barnier, who negotiated on behalf of the EU with their British counterparts. They are not necessarily household names by far, but they are known quantities for a lot more Europeans than before Brexit happened.
And we see them, I think, the sort of, so-called populists, they make a sort of a career basically out of bashing the EU, this conflict framing that we know works on social media. We know that negativity drives voter mobilization, for example. And I think what I've seen recently is some of these EU leaders going on the offensive. And I've sort of always thought that, like, why doesn't the pro-Europeans attack the anti-Europeans? And because it works. And so we've seen Donald Tusk say there was a special place in hell for people who didn't have a plan about Brexit. I don't have the exact wording, but Jean-Claude Juncker said something that like nationalists, idiots or something, called them stupid nationalists or something. This is the type of stuff that will go trending on social media. It increases saliency. It increases voter mobilization, most likely.
And this is the effect, what we say here, of politicization. I think, Peter de Wilde, if you're later listening or watching this, you'll be happy to see your approach being definitely tested and applied in reality.
What is politicization? Politicization
is it's many things, but in what I'm trying to apply it to here, it means simply that the European questions are no longer technical, but they are discussed along political, ideological lines, not only in technocratic circles, but by politicians and thereafter by citizens who these politicians claim to represent. Mm-hmm. So the European Union has become more of a matter of political debate, not just a matter of technical discussion between experts.
Which is an interesting dynamic. Again, a lot of this will be thinking out loud as we move along, but so Brexit has been so much in the news, but Brexit is connected to the European Union by proxy necessarily.
You cannot talk about Brexit without talking about Brexit, like exit from what?
Yeah, exactly. And so even if, and we've seen this in our own research, right, that conversations about Brexit from other member states than the UK create a sort of the conditions for this European public sphere. They Europeanize national public debate. And so even if the focus is on Brexit or Theresa May leaving or whatever, the European Union is either explicitly salient or somewhere salient in the discussion.
And named, just
And just that, I think that type of saliency is part of the explanation for why voters now feel that they should take their time to go.
And this is also something that, again, probably some people will deplore the picture that emerges from this election, which is a fragmented picture. And this is, again, something we've seen very much at the national level, where mainstream parties, center parties lose votes, whereas one-issue parties or new parties, challenger parties gain more votes. And so the playing field is more leveled between actors who are increasingly of equal size. And they may or may not agree. So there's a need to politicize. There's a need to make issues more salient. And I think this can be a positive outcome of this fragmentation. Fragmentation, politicization, more discussion about the European Union, and more actual debate that will directly pertain to citizens' concerns, because citizens are concerned, and we know, looking also at the Eurobarometer and other opinion polls, that climate change was a concern, but so was immigration, so was the state of public finance of different member states, so was peace and security in the world. So these things are important for the Europeans, and I think it's very nice to see that their opinions are actually represented by this distribution of parties. I think it's a confirmation that this is a democratic exercise. We're seeing this in action.
And directly along that point, what do you think about the losers, right? The Social Democrats and the EPP, two large parties that represent the kind of center left and center right, who kind of work together usually when they need to fend off the Eurosceptic threat. They lose a lot of seats collectively.
Yes.
How do you think that fits into the democratic ideal? Is it more democratic that more opinions are respected on the fringe in terms of climate, in terms of Euroscepticism, in terms of whatever it is? What's the implications of these big parties losing?
Well, it's a very big question. I think at the level of the European Parliament, we're not looking at one party. It's a multitude of parties. So the Social Democrats, the European Social Democrats, are basically a federation of social democratic parties from across the European Union. The same with pretty much all the other parties, European parties, and the European party groups are European Parliament party groups are yet another exercise in coalition making between different national parties. So we're not talking with a unitary voice. However, I think it's clear that Social Democrats are not performing very well at the unitary level. However, in Portugal, they came number one. In Spain, they came number one. They performed well also in some other countries. I'm thinking also of Sweden here, where they also came number one. So they're not really dead. It's said that this trend is not even. The Social Democrats in Hungary, the Social Democrats in Poland, they were not very successful. So that basically draws the balance down. And that's why it's always important to see the process in perspective. The same with the EPP. I think obviously both these major parties, mainstream parties, let's talk of them unitarily, have bled votes to their respective left and right. So a lot of the EPP voters went to the more radical far right, and a lot of the Social Democrat voters went green. And that's a classical example of what we have seen in Germany. In Germany, the SPD has not delivered very good results because a lot of their voters went the green route this time.
And I can't help but think how that dynamic mirrors what we see in national politics as well, where major parties, speaking about mostly in European countries with proportional representation systems, the mainstream parties lose. You have these other, they might be fringe, they might be sort of just spin-offs of the mainstream, I don't know. I kind of like how there's more diversity in the parliament, but I wonder to what extent that impedes policy making and day-to-day functioning.
There may be so. I mean, there's so many speculations, but if the Eurosceptics, if Salvini is really successful in creating this unitary front of the Eurosceptics, they, even though not extremely numerous, as I mentioned before, only the fifth largest, they may basically prevent the European Parliament from reaching any conclusive decision, from legislating, but even from making symbolic statements united about certain issues of concern to Europeans. And they will be like how can I say, the stopping point in a lot of initiatives that so far managed to go on without their help, because they were so fragmented they couldn't act to prevent the other people from cooperating. And it's important in this case, it becomes more relevant because the two center parties, the Social Democrats and the European People's Party, together lost their majority. It was a weak majority. Together they had 56% in the 2014 to 2019 parliament, but now they are below 50%.
Yeah.
So they will be forced to collaborate with anyone.
Well, I'm looking at the spectrum here. I could see the Greens aligning with the Social Democrats, but then maybe the Greens would not go along with the European People's Party on certain initiatives.
I'm pretty sure this will be a very issue-by-issue situation in many cases. It's also very exciting to see what happens with the Liberal Democrats. We haven't discussed so much about them. One of the major reasons why they go up with 40 seats, according to this provisional number, is because of Macron's party.
Renaissance.
La Renaissance, that's the name of the platform. And the proposal is to bring a renewal life into the idea of European integration. So it's a very integrationist agenda, very, very pro-European. And that aligns well with the Greens. The Greens have three issues, and climate action, of course, is number one. But civil liberties and social justice are also on the agenda. And that allows them to find common ground both on with a more further left parties, with the Social Democrats, and at least on some points with the Liberal Democrats. So it's not impossible to see this kind of more left-oriented coalition. Very interesting to see if there is this tendency which we have seen in national politics with the EPP associated parties collaborating with the nationalists. I don't know.
They might have to with the Greens.
They might have to if they want to do that, but it hasn't been very productive. Think about Tories.
Yeah.
I mean, this is also an extreme case because of the Brexit situation, but definitely not an easy cohabitation there on the right side of the spectrum. But I think it's interesting, and I think one other conclusion that I think is important to highlight, at least in my eyes, I don't know if you agree, maybe we'll discuss this in terms of the campaign, but some of these results show to me the shy emergence of a European, let's say, political space of a European demos, as sometimes we would place a public sphere. Europeans uniting around certain issues, also divided along the same lines, immigration versus climate change, perhaps in terms of the order of priorities. But I think we see that. When we look at the results in member states, we see maybe a shy beginning, I emphasize this, of the erosion of the second order national elections. Maybe it's not second order national elections. I think definitely we see this in three major countries. In Italy, where it was very much a play between the Northern League and the Five Star Movement and the Democratic Party. So that was definitely national politics, and Salvini was very clever at positioning himself there. Very much so in France, explicitly by Macron. Macron said that this is an election about which kind of leadership you want, which kind of Europe you want, and you want me or you want Marine Le Pen. And the public said, we want Marine Le Pen, but the distance is not so much. Marine Le Pen's national rally. Thank you. National new name, same thing.
From
new
the National
name.
Front.
A renaissance of this extreme movement. It got 24%, and the Macron party, the La République En Marche, got 21.5 or so. So it means simply that there was not such a huge distance. The French are kind of split between them on if it's Marine or Macron that is winning.
Eminem.
But definitely that was a case of a national election. And also in Greece, where Alexis Tsipras from Syriza said that if they are not winning, which they haven't, new elections will be organized, and it's happening in the fall of this year.
They had to have them before September or something.
There's definitely changes happening. But otherwise, I think there's much more going on in terms of a pan-European discourse. Can I also say one final thing about the Nationalist Party, a country that we don't often talk so much about, Romania? Romania actually also sees a very interesting development because a party that is a junior party, a party without any government experience, without any parliamentarian experience, registers 23% of the vote. This is a major entry, like from 0 to 23%. I think this is also pretty interesting. The USR will join the Liberal Democrats, the ALDE group, and they also contribute an important number of mandates, and also signals a new trend in East European politics where disaffected publics don't exist as much as before, but really we see an engagement on the pro-European front.
I'm curious to get your take on, speaking of Eastern Europe and looking a little bit at the nationalist parties. We have in terms of who won, I think it was Italy, France, and Hungary is where the nationalist kind of anti-immigration parties had won the election.
In Poland too, the PIS went constant to like 43%. So they're not as radical.
Right.
It's hard to place them exactly. They're not as radical, but it's possible that we can associate them with this trend. So they also are the major winners.
And my question is, I guess, because when you look at the map, and in terms of who holds the most seats, if Brexit happens and they leave the EU, and there's all sorts of speculation because of this election about whether they will or not, if the UK were to leave, then you would have, I mean, you look at the big players that really control most of the decision making. You have punch up their weight. You have France, Italy, and Germany, right? Germany having a huge win with the Greens.
Yeah.
Italy and France, big wins for the
But also the Merkel's party said it was the major winner. So the Greens came number 2 in Germany.
Oh, okay. It's been fluctuating as we've been. Yes,
exactly. But they lost. They lost percentages.
So how do you think that squares at the European level when you have France and Italy that have these nationalist representations in the parliament? Because I'm thinking, usually we think of European politics in terms of France, Germany, and the UK as the big players. So if they leave, then the prominence of Italy comes in, and I mean these are the biggest economies.
It's very complicated to make a story. I really don't want to go there. It's so much. It's so complicated. But we should definitely say something about what happened in the UK, because also there we've seen a major upset of anything we know, because the Tories got, again, I'm not having maybe the absolute latest numbers, but they got something like 9% of the vote. I mean, this is basically in direct parlance, them being wiped out. And the major winner is obviously the Brexit party. Nigel Farage proves again and again
his European funding line for doing nothing.
For being an open critic. And again, one can talk more about that, but clearly the Brexit party that doesn't have much of a platform is the number 1. And then the Lib Dems, the very clear pro-Remain party, they also make a spectacular election success.
I wonder very, very subtly, again, Nick Clegg, former Lib Dem leader, now at Facebook doing public policy with the
He's
European
rubbing
Union.
his
I wonder if he's got
hands
his
in victory.
Tentacles in the parliament now. We'll see.
I think this is clearly, again, a national vote. Like it's a Remain versus Leave. And
Corbyn is calling for another, either a second referendum or a general election, as these elections being basically a
Labour has also been punished pretty bad for being ambiguous. But it's very, very interesting to see. It basically shows again that the European elections, very hastily organized in the UK, with a lot of EU citizens not allowed to vote because of administrative failures and so on, they nevertheless show this kind of picture where traditional parties basically are exiting the main scene, and one new party and a usually marginal party take the center stage. Also, let it be known, as we were talking before, this event, that it's not the regular UK election style. This is not first past the post.
Yeah, it's a parliamentary system.
It is a majoritarian system, so that's why we have a different landscape. Also, the Greens got some votes in the UK as well. So it's interesting to see that more diverse picture emerging when given the chance by the electoral system.
So maybe one of the unspoken winners of this election might be McDonald's and their milkshake sales, which have been skyrocketing.
And by the way, now that we talk about this, the independent candidate, Robinson, who was the most extreme voice in these elections, did not make it. So he will not be a member of the European Parliament. So again, there was no room for this type of candidate, this kind of extreme rabbit discourse.
I think we should, I know it's difficult to get to figures on this, but looking at the Central Eastern Europe piece, we see Viktor Orban and Fidesz as winning their
they won over 50%.
Which is perhaps unsurprising. Poland also a very strong showing for the nationalist parties, but most of the Eastern Bloc seemed nothing. I mean, they're sort of dealing with. They're kind of split between, you have a climate up in the Nordics, and then you have a bit of
economic concerns,
but generally
and
kind
immigration.
Kind of pretty level. I don't know if that's a correct state to say, but people have a mixture of concerns there. There's obviously Russian interest with these countries being former Soviet blocs, but we'll see how those results roll in. But nothing too spectacular in the media in terms of what's going on there.
Nothing totally unusual except for this Romanian new entry on the political stage. Well, I wanted to also say, to support my idea that maybe we're entering into this new Europeanized politics, like this is the first step in that direction, is also that for the first time, we have two explicitly transnational parties that make it into the European Parliament. With one MEP each, so no major upsetting of balance there. But it's important at a symbolic level that we have Volt, that got one mandate in Germany, and Diem, Democracy in Movement, got
like
one.
A song. Poetry in Motion. Something.
Yes, kind of like that. Well, they claim to be a more, alternative party. So Diem got one seat in Greece. So we have two transnational party MEPs entering the stage. And of course, their agenda has been to promote a more integrative view of European politics, not thinking basically of the European Union as a single constituency, which is an interesting discourse, an interesting proposal that nevertheless got support. I was looking at the numbers, and the candidate from Volt in Germany got almost 290,000 votes, which is not a small
party.
Which didn't have campaign financing and all that stuff. So I think the trend towards more transnationalization, more Europeanized politics is just in its infancy, but it's not there to go away.
Interesting. So that's kind of the hardcore election breakdown politics piece. Key takeaways?
In my opinion, again, main thing, the Europeanized dimension. No major Eurosceptic win. Possibly a more coalesced bloc. Possibly not. I'm still quite skeptical knowing the internal fights between these people. Fragmentation and higher voter turnout, which has to do with Brexit increase in visibility and politicization.
And I think we'll see, I mean, at least till October 31st when they're slated to leave, we'll see that
the excitement continues.
The excitement continues. It's also great for our research on Brexit, which is taking a little longer than expected, still relevant. But I think that will be in the news very much. And again, because of this proxy effect it has of bringing Europe into the... I mean, I'm just by trying to look at the election results, it's dominated by what's happening in the UK. And we've also seen that. So
with the climate change being a little bit of an outlier.
And we've seen that in the academic literature. When you look at media mentions about Europe, they tend to involve the big three, which is Europe, the UK, France, and Germany. So the UK is sort of gobbling up a lot of the media attention because of Brexit. It will continue to do that. Europe will continue to be inserted into the public sphere. But let's see, maybe that if they leave on the 31st, there'll be some aftermath, and then it will change to something else.
They'll change the number of the seats, will go down again.
Yeah, which is interesting. So I was looking at that, and they're going to reallocate the seats based on those that they believe are underrepresented.
Yeah, Sweden will gain one seat, apparently.
Mostly rich countries get more seats. But what's interesting is they're saving. So I think there's something like 76, don't quote me on that, seats that the UK gives. I think
not all of them are gone.
46 are saved for countries that might join in the future, which is interesting. Who?
Well, again, we have Macedonia as a candidate country. We had Serbia, probably the most likely. I mean, again, likely and unlikely. This is definitely not in the near future, not even in the medium term. But Serbia, probably. Albania is a candidate country. So some of the Western Balkans are potentially.
So 46 seats is a pretty good chunk to be saving for future EU countries. I mean,
they were discussing to have this for transnational lists, which was a proposal that eventually got shut down. But these reserved seats were intended to be reserved for transnational lists, basically parties that can be voted by everyone for everyone, Europe as a single constituency. That idea was rejected by EPP and generally in the European Council, but the idea is not dead. So I think debates about reformulating the how can I say, the composition of the European Parliament, I think it's still going to be in 5 years' time, something we'll discuss, hopefully.
I would like one. If anyone's listening who can make that happen,
Yes.
I'll take a seat.
Yes. Well, who knows? Who knows? Everything is possible. Though, as an American, I don't know.
I don't know. That's why I need someone to give me a seat. All right. Let's move into the campaigning, the digital campaigning, the social media. Interesting things
So
to
the question
say.
I have for you, right?
geez.
I have a question. Like I've been talking about the Brexit effect and the increased voter turnout, which is generalized all over the membership and so on. Do you think that the social media campaign or the general campaign, not only on social media, but also through activities offline, debates between the Spitzenkandidaten, did this have any effect on voter turnout?
I would say I think that Brexit effect had the most. If I could just predict something without backing it up with any evidence, I think that Brexit effect is the most important factor. I think the European Parliament. We've been in these circles. We've been hearing about these initiatives as they were happening last year and starting off. I think that there was a real push this year. I think it did some innovative things. So they had the This Time I'm Voting.
This is the motto. This is the hashtag of the campaign. This time I'm voting.
Which is interesting. So I've spent a bit of time previously for my students and preparing lectures and stuff, looking at the 2014 campaign. We've also done some work on this.
Try to pull the numbers on some of this time I'm voting data. That's what I'm looking away. Yes.
Yes. What's interesting is that as new as some of these initiatives are, so let's talk about the new initiatives, and then we'll kind of parse out the comparisons, differences from 2014. So in terms of new things, they really put a push into launching an online presence, a website. They had some
an own homepage.
Yeah. I think it was a homepage. Yeah. This Time I'm Voting.
Yeah. You can access it.
And
now.
there was a bunch of challenges you could unlock. Like if you got 4 friends to subscribed
To
to the campaign
mobilize,
on social
yeah.
media, you would get some point or stars. If you collected 12 stars, you would get I don't know, some sort of prize or I don't know. I never actually participated because I can't vote. There were things like you could create a live event. So this for me reminded me of the
Party. You could do a mob.
watch party.
A watch party.
so this reminded me very much of the 2008 Obama campaign and the MyBo site and how you could you could become
a little bit late.
a little bit late in the game, but well done. And so it introduced that gamified element that we've talked about on the podcast.
Yes.
In terms of gamification is a huge civic engagement potential.
And this may be, reflecting something. I'm looking at some numbers, and they are from the 13th of May, so 2 weeks before the actual elections. You can also see here that overall for the entire European Union, over 300,000 citizens have volunteered to be a part of this campaign. And about 8% of them, 24,582 at the time, became volunteers, organizers of these very localized events.
I think they report on the website total number of people who have engaged. I think it's 350,000.
In the meantime,
so it's been up for about 2 weeks,
which
makes
great.
sense in the context of the election. Quick plug for if you want to hear more about the kind of design of that for the EuropeCom podcast, episode 1, I interviewed Stephen Clark where he talked about this. And I was asking him some questions about it, like, this time I'm voting. Why was that chosen? I think it's interesting, actually. 2014 campaign, their tagline was, this time it's different.
This time is different.
So now it's this time I'm voting. And there's some
Much
interesting...
more proactive, right? That's an action-oriented
proactive.
hashtag.
So I went back and listened to that interview just to get some ideas about what one of the drivers of that campaign was saying. He said it's shareable. It's not based on any issue, right? This time I'm voting.
You can vote even against Europe if you wanted to.
And to the European Parliament's credit, they've been very clear in their promotional material that, and I think they did that very well in 2014 video. We'll get to the 2019 video later.
Yeah.
I
you have to link it later.
I'll put it in the show notes. I'll put it in the show notes. The 2014 video showed if you're up for blowing up Europe, then vote to do that. And I enjoyed that transparency. But this time I'm voting. It's not polarizing. It cross-cuts demographics. It's shareable. And interestingly, from a political science perspective, it's a bit of a shame. It's like a shaming element to it. It's like, I didn't vote last time. And
your duty as a citizen.
Yeah. And actually, field experiments from the United States show that shame is a driver of mobilization. So there's this famous study by Green and Gerber, I think it is, or some of these classic political scientists, and they looked at so they did direct mail campaigns to citizens, and they used public voter records, which you can get in the U.S.
Like everybody around you.
So they had one condition that was like, we're going to tell your neighbors if you don't vote, and then those who they thought that their neighbors would know were out to vote. So basically, long story short, the shame element, if you shame people into not voting,
this was a conscious choice. This was a conscious choice from the "This Time I'm Voting" campaign. No.
Well, maybe it was. But
I'm just
saying.
If in the interview
No.
it was revealed.
The shame part is more like it seems this was a good strategy to do. This time it's different. Is kind of like, well, what about the next 40 elections?
Voting is very. Well, of course, it's vague because what are you voting about? But maybe that was also part of the idea. I also thought it was very nice to have these micro influencers in action. I know you've been talking about this a little bit more. So can you tell everybody what are micro influencers?
In this term. So it's funny. I when I talk about micro influencers in the context of a larger presentation, everyone loves the micro influencers concept. I got to give full credit.
Are?
Tom Lillywhite, who we did an episode. I think it was back in it was around episode 40 or something.
Historical.
Mobilizing the pack. So Tom wrote a great piece about micro-influencers, so I borrowed that from him.
But who are these people?
Micro-influencers is the idea that, there's a lot of talk about getting a YouTube influencer to promote your content.
I'm getting too excited. I'm going to even take off my
Oh, wait, the microphone's attached to your jacket. Don't do that.
Don't do that. I can't do it.
Okay, you can take it off now. You're good.
Thanks.
All right. So the idea of micro-influencers is that you're not trying to get, I don't know, who's an influencer?
Kim Kardashian.
Kim Kardashian. Well, yeah, she's major. But the idea is that within your own social network, so everyone who is on Facebook or Twitter, are networks. A small portion of those networks are very close friends. And when we share something on those networks, we actually have some persuasive power of people at least listening to what we say. So the idea is that you can, as an organization or a campaign, you can have, when people start sharing things within their networks, they can become micro-influencers. They don't have Facebook friends or pages numbering in thousands and thousands.
So you could be unpopular and still be a micro-influencer. You can have like 500 friends or lower.
Yeah, and then you might influence 20. So you're a micro-influencer, but this is the idea. I mean, this is network effects, basically.
And this is the idea of authenticity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Also something that we've been talking about. And generally, even at the ICA conference, a frequently used keyword. And I think this is a very nice move from the European Parliament, not to come with this impression of propaganda. Oh, we're here at the European Parliament and want you to vote for Europe. But like, we're not telling you anything. It's trust your friends. They tell you something. Mm-hmm. And we just help people who want to do this to be informed and distribute correct information. So that was also, I think, a way to combat disinformation, misinformation, by providing citizens, particularly those citizens that had an interest, expressed an interest voluntarily in European matters, with the appropriate correct information to further spread in their own networks.
Yeah. And and I think that I lost my train of thought here.
Sorry.
What were we talking about?
We're talking about micro-influencers.
Micro-influencers.
And we're talking about
Authenticity.
disinformation.
Oh, no. I wanted to plug upcoming podcast episode. I'm going to record it in a couple days with Authentic Campaigns.
Authentic.
Who does social media
it's in the name of the company?
Exactly. So a social media firm that does paid social for Kamala Harris. So we're going to break down what is Authentic Campaigns, and that should be an exciting interview. I also asked Stephen Clark, who's doing this campaign, about why is the European Parliament campaigning for voter turnout? This is something that should be left classically to parties, whether European or national. And his response was that the European Parliament, by design, is a very difficult organization to understand. I mean, I studied European studies in your program. You've been teaching European studies, and still, like, that was my master's degree, and it's still difficult to understand for someone who studies that. So they put money behind these paid promotions in order to make it more accessible. And also, there's an interesting element between the EU level and the national level, which is, if you leave the campaigning to national level politicians, they're most likely to campaign on national issues. So you need the organization itself to project a message that's nonpartisan, get out the vote, increase turnout, 50%.
And they did this with the help of a video. What do you think of this video?
God.
The video.
Choose
Anybody
your
out there
future.
have seen the video? You,
the video.
What do you
Choose your
think?
future. I wasn't a fan.
Why
I wasn't
not?
a fan at all. I mean, so the video, just to give a quick background to what it is, if you haven't seen it, I'm sure most listeners here have seen it.
How many people have seen it? Do you remember?
Yeah, I have the stats.
Millions of views.
So the content, let's do the content first. We're going to do the sharing numbers first. This video had 34 million views on YouTube.
34 million.
34 million views on YouTube, 14,000 likes, 4.4 thousand dislikes. So a good like to dislike ratio, not the best, but people supported it. Had 101 million views on YouTube. 101 million views on Facebook.
101 million views. That's a lot.
Remember their 3-second counts. So, we don't have to actually
blinked
watch.
Once.
The video itself is 3 minutes and 10 seconds.
It's kind of long for a promotional video.
Too long, way too long. 125,000 shares, about 430,000 reactions.
Not bad. Altogether, I think, of course, we're talking about a massive constituency here.
500 million, roughly.
Well, I think voting rights, 350 million, but still, this is a major public to reach. Yeah. So 34 million, maybe not a huge amount, but it's more than what it used to be, at least, right?
So if you add it together, so it comes out to be about 135 million views across the two platforms.
Which can be the same person watching on and on.
It's important to note that it's also been put into traditional media slots, so it's been played on television in different countries, so it's been seen by a lot of people. Euractiv recently took this basically 100 million views, and I think very erroneously, and I'll just go ahead and say, very much to their discredit, stated that the headline of the article is 1 in 5 Europeans saw the video, which is, it's 1 in 5 of the, in numbers, but there's no way to say that. So overselling the success of the video. Very high production value. They got some it was a big French producer to do it.
I didn't even know who did it.
I mean, like from a visual standpoint, it was a very good,
very authentic,
very well produced. And let's get into the content. You turn it in, you turn it on.
Maybe too authentic.
You see a fetus. It's actually live footage of childbirthing. And the idea.
You see the pain, a lot of pain. Childbirth
anguish,
pain.
A lot of music reminded me of the Mad World, Donnie Darko, like.
And very dark, just like.
Dark, yeah.
What was
darker than Game of Thrones.
Darker than Game of Thrones. It was definitely not easy to see in the beginning, like not easy to, not because it was painful, but because it was hard to distinguish what was going on the screen. But then it became lighter as the child is being born.
The child's born about minute 120.
Yeah.
The child comes out, and then still not very.
I see this motif because I recently rewatched the 2014 promotional video, and there also a child is being born.
So funny.
Maybe the European
it's actually hilarious. So 2014, they had the Act, React, Impact campaign. Similar. This time I'm voting. This time I'm different. This time it's different. This time whatever. The beginning of that video is exactly a childbirth. So they seem sold on this time, fill in the blank, and birthing as a thing. And
it's future oriented. Everybody likes babies.
Everyone likes babies, but they don't like babies in umbilical cords and
this medical aspect.
Blood. It's not so much the babies being born as it is the women in labor that has me off. I think to an extent they're trying to break taboos around feminism and childbirth and these type of things. I think there's a woman movement to it with Me Too and all of these things. At the same time,
women make Europe.
I
wonder. I mean, I think you're reading too much into this.
I think I am, but I thought a lot about it because it was their big push. Super successful on social media. I mean, of course, there's a lot of paid promotion behind this, which I think they didn't do in 2014. Their Act, React, Impact video, which I thought was much better.
Shorter for sure.
So about a minute long. Had 1 million views on YouTube compared to 34 in this new case. And it received just literally a fraction of the engagement, like 1,500 shares compared to 125,000. But I thought it was a better video, not necessarily for social media, but I just liked they included all these different perspectives of what's possible to vote for. This particular video,
this was a more storytelling approach. That one was more fragmented, and this is more storytelling.
It's more storytelling.
It's a more emotional appeal. Emotional,
yes. And I think we have some slides from a campaign where they're going for strong emotional messaging, but it's not suited for social media. It's too long. It's too.
You mean it was more TV or more?
I don't know what it was. I thought it was like it's a well-produced product. There's no doubt about that. But in terms of like garnering virality, I'm sure people who are defending this can say we got the virality with our paid promotion. But I didn't want to see that. It was too. It was over the line in terms of
too much pain.
Yeah, and okay, so there might be some critical listeners who say, okay, this guy's a man, and you know he's watching childbirth. I don't want to see babies. I don't want to see cows being born on YouTube in this real life footage. It's almost like, it was too serious for me in the context of.
Well, I think they also wanted to emphasize the difficulty, and I think that we make this Europe together. And it's painful. It's nothing like a walk in the park. This is hard work, and I think that was also the message textual, like with the voiceover, which was a child this time. It was also quite cute. It was the child that was being born, telling something to the future. It was interesting. Definitely worth watching.
I would love to see actually the voter turnout by gender. Do we have it actually? I think.
No.
There was something on
I think it's
gender
the MEPs,
somewhere. MEPs by gender. That's what it was. I'd love to see whether that maybe galvanized women vote. which is huge also in the United States in terms of that's the key.
If you manage to
demographic.
get them to vote, definitely. But this was just one aspect of the social media, right? So what else is happening on social media? If we look at campaigning and social media.
There was, it's hard to, there's the ad archive you can go and check out on Facebook to see what parties were actually doing. I looked a little bit around at it, but the interface is still quite bad. So it's, I looked at some European Parliament ads that the ad archive was saying was targeted in the United States, which makes no sense. So I don't really want to report anything from there because I don't quite trust it. At least when I was looking about a month ago.
Yeah.
But there was an interesting case where Facebook put in a new policy in order to combat disinformation, which was if you're going to run an ad, you have to be registered in the country that you're running the ad. So if you're a transnational parliament or European party group, then
you have to be anchored in local.
You can't be anchored in every country and register in 28 countries to run one ad. So that actually drew a lot of criticism from people working in the institutions, not just in the European Parliament, but the Council, the Commission.
Because they themselves could not.
They could not run the ads, and we'll be talking about that in an upcoming your podcast episode.
Too many upcoming episodes.
Too many upcoming episodes. So make sure you're subscribed. But yeah, so they complained to Facebook, and Facebook decided they would basically pause this regulation for 2 weeks in this context
for the European elections.
For the European elections. Still frustrated a lot of campaigners, but also civil society groups who have to have partners in different countries. So people on the ground doing like civic organization work. They were also had some difficulties with this
which
regulation.
Promotes maybe more need for cooperation. Now, if you have to have a partner, they go out and seek a partner.
Exactly.
So this could be interesting. What consequences they have?
So there's some benefits perhaps to it, but I do know that the general Brussels bubble take is that Facebook, as a Silicon Valley company, doesn't understand the complexity and the way that EU works.
Actually, I think this is without a doubt true.
It could be true. I don't know where Nick Clegg is on this one, but what's interesting, I think, for me, is there's a parallel to the U.S. midterms, which is Facebook required political campaigns in the U.S. to put the paid for and do all this registering a month. We talked about it with Adam Meldrum in a recent episode. That they put these requirements in place right before an election, and it just causes scrambling. I mean, campaigns.
All the planning is already done.
It's done.
All the messages are already created. The money's spent
to a good amount, and so that was an interesting wrench, I think. So Facebook kind of backed off. They said for the rest of the campaign we won't require this, but in terms of future transnational ads, we'll see. And thinking just out loud about it, I mean, it's one thing if you're a European party group. It's also interesting if it depends on the size of your country, right?
Yeah.
If you're in I don't know, one of these former Yugoslavian countries, for example, and your countries are small, but you want to have a message that reaches a larger populace, or if you're in Denmark and you have a political ad that you also want to connect Swedes and Norwegians to, for an example. It makes
integration
it very difficult to do
is
that.
not easy. Yeah, definitely.
Exactly.
How about Twitter? We have collected some data.
We should have probably prefaced the show with that, but anyone who's still tuned in will have a sneak peek at some Twitter data on the EP elections.
I think soon the Europeans are waking up, so we're basically catching the morning ride, people. Yes, but we have collected some data. And I was just trying to summarize it, but I don't have the absolute latest. Do you have the absolute latest?
I have the latest numbers. So we collected via the streaming API, for those in the data science know. This is probably not the full list of all tweets. It could be a sample. It could not be. We don't know because we
didn't purchase.
We haven't
this
bought the data. Yeah. It was about. So we had the hashtags for the main EP 2019, EU elections 2019, and all these different national variations. And that data set in total is right at about 3 million. We started it, I think, around the beginning of May.
No, beginning of March.
Beginning of March?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Well,
I checked.
Touche.
Yeah. Now it's confirmed.
But
'cause
we definitely saw about in just the past couple of days about 1 million
Yeah.
tweets. It's about 1/3 of the data coming from the past week of the election, which makes
Yeah.
sense. What we see in other
So
contexts.
3 million.
3 million overall.
I was looking again probably just before coming to ICA, so that's less than a week ago, at some of the hashtags that hashtag co-occurrences. What type of content basically is indexed online, and I was trying to disentangle this via language. And again, no surprise, English is the dominant language. We have at the time over 1 million tweets in English, and about 250,000 users, individual users.
It's about four tweets per person.
Kind of like that. Of course, not evenly distributed.
Could be some
either.
bots in there. We haven't parsed it yet.
No clean data. This is the dirtiest version of the data, and. It's interesting that if you select English language, the most popular hashtag, which is not one of the keywords we were looking at, so not the EP elections or EU elections or these things, is Brexit.
Mm-hmm.
So in the English discourse is Brexit, and several other national UK, hashtags come up, like Remain, People's Vote, Leave, Labour, and so on. So they were very UK based, even though English is the lingua franca of the entire internet. It was actually, if you specified the language, a very much UK based politics. And even the parties that were named in English were the players on the UK scene, like the Brexit Party, Conservative, Lib Dems, and Farage as the politician of the day.
Farage Barrage, that's what they say.
Barrage. Also some media channels, BBC and the Maher political show were the most popular.
Bill Maher.
Yeah, and I looked at data in German, which is the next most popular. So English definitely number one, then German, Spanish, French.
Interestingly, I just pulled some recent data. I don't know how reliable it is from Statista. Their 2019 data shows that Spain is the most populous Twitter users per population, behind the UK. So the UK is about 14% of the population on Twitter. Spain's about 6%. Germany did make the top 10. I didn't pay for the premium to see where.
But interestingly enough, so in our political focus data set, Spain has most users, but not as many tweets, whereas Germany has slightly less users by like 2,000 or so, but more tweets. So the German Twitter sphere is much more active. And I'm trying to pull the data. I cannot find it right now, but I remember, without giving you concrete numbers, that for Germany, Klimat was something to that extent was an important keyword, and the AfD was an important keyword, but also no to AfD. So there was, remember the hashtag war? Hashtag wars were definitely going on very clearly, both in Germany and in Spain. So the most popular party in terms of the social media visibility was AfD, but not so far behind in this top ranked frequency count was the no to AfD. And again, they had the CDU, like the Merkel's party, and then niemals CDU, no more CDU. And that went for almost every party. You had the pro-party hashtag and the against party hashtag, almost one close to the other. So that was very interesting for Germany. In Spain, the most popular hashtag was connected. I didn't know what it was. It was like something very special. Again, very national based, very specific. If you were not Spanish, you didn't know what it was. And it was in fact connected to the new party Vox. That campaigned for a nativist, nationalist version of Spanishness. And that was the number one hashtag within the data set. Not the Vox party itself, but their name of their campaign.
Which aligns with some of our research from the UK showing that it's probably these sort of nationalist. And the nationalist supporters tend to be the most active on social media. We see that across across contexts in Europe and outside. And one explanation, I think personally, we haven't validated this in academic research, but I think they tend to be older.
Yeah.
They tend to be retired, and they tend to have more time to.
I'm trying to find exactly what was that specific keyword in Spanish, and it is España viva. España viva, like alive, Spain alive.
Vamos.
And that is España Viva was connected to Vox party's motto for their campaign. And I forgot to say, now that I have the data in front of me, that Germany had also a political keyword, Article 13.
Absolutely.
Do you know what Article 13 is?
I know, and I am not surprised.
And what is Article 13?
Article 13 was essentially a regulation that, I think it's a regulation anyways, that basically directs platform providers, particularly
Yes.
YouTube is the primary thing, that they will have to essentially somewhat filter content to make sure it doesn't infringe on copyright regulations.
Exactly. And that was very controversial because it was perceived by many as a form of censorship. It was also perceived as prohibiting any kind of creative use of existing content, like all memes would be banned because of this. And it was definitely a matter of discussion in Germany.
It's interesting dynamic because we know that the Germans are super concerned about data privacy and internet. They get really passionate. I know this from some Germans, I'm sure you do as well. Some Germans that I know that's really an issue they really care about, and it's kind of an interesting dynamic where you have people, when you have an internet privacy or censorship law, people start coming out and tweeting about it, which is basically producing more data for the platforms. So that's interesting.
It generated a lot of analysis material.
We talked about a little bit about that with Bill Ottman in a previous episode, the CEO from Minds, and his take on it.
So yeah, that was, I wanted to say also that I looked at Sweden because of course I'm from Sweden, so I want to know what's going on there. Very few tweets, very few tweets at the time. 8,000 tweets coming from 3,300 users. That's it, not much. And again, very nice capture looking at co-occurrence of hashtags. We had climate, migration politics, and Europe needs feminism. And
which relates to
Swexit.
the Feminist Initiative Party
exactly.
in Sweden, which did quite well.
No, they lost their mandate.
They lost their mandate.
They lost their mandate. They mobilized, but could not win enough votes, unfortunately for them. This time they were under the 4% threshold.
So
that's basically what I wanted to say. That one general takeaway from this is that these language selections, these language clusters, reveal a national debate. Mm-hmm. This is a national debate. It is clearly something that, it's in terms of what I was saying before, is this a Europeanized public sphere, Europeanized political space? It is. At the same time, it is very local. It also appears that this time I'm voting hashtag appeared across all these national clusters, which maybe goes to show, again, what we're talking about, that they really had a reach for all Europeans.
For those critical listeners who are tuning in saying, this is Twitter data, this is only Twitter, and there's not many Europeans on Twitter, let me be the first to stand behind the fact that I agree. So what's interesting, I think, what you're saying is that it's a national debate. It's on Twitter. There's not many users in European countries on Twitter. So on the one hand, you could say, is it a national debate? But I think it reflects to an extent in a national debate, at least of those people who are typically, we know from studies, higher educated, larger social economic status, basically drivers and movers of things.
With great political interest. And of course, it's a political hashtag that we collect. So
exactly,
it's not
exactly. I want to hone in a bit on the hashtag. Let me just check and see if I have what it is. It was, I think, hashtag Tell Europe, which was focused on the Spitzenkandidaten debate, the potential leader debate of who will be the next Commission president. we collected, so Twitter basically put out this hashtag, or the European Parliament, but who knows, put out this hashtag. You could submit questions through that. I don't think my question was selected. But anyways.
It's nice of you to actually have sent in something.
I sent in something. I actually didn't watch the debates. I planned to at some point. But that was also the debate for people to do dual screening, second screening, whatever you want to call it. They could tweet about the campaign about the debate using that hashtag. That hashtag got about 8,000 tweets on the day of
But it was only one day.
On the debate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is not much, is it?
It's not, if you think about, I mean, again, all of this Twitter stuff, we're going to go into it systematically, and we're going to figure out exactly what's going on. So these are overall numbers, very quick and dirty reporting. But I mean, 8,000 tweets, if someone's dual screening a debate, they're probably tweeting multiple times. So I have the users, I think, this is from memory, I think it's something like 4,000 or 5,000 users tweeting 8,000 tweets during a debate about who will be the commission president for a quite large body of people, and a very influential. But I haven't watched.
But you see, this
debates.
is a problem of the media, national, traditional media filtering. And what I'm saying, again, I'm thinking about Sweden. There's a lot of Sweden in this episode, just because I'm very, familiar with that case. There was no media channel that retransmitted this debate. It was transmitted online, only in digital form, not through the television. If you sat in front of the television, you couldn't see it. And it was on the Swedish television, the public service forum. I didn't even know that channel existed. And I like to watch television. I like even political television.
Yeah, and
so this is a very obscure, they could just as well not send it at all, right? So it is, the fact that there were so few people that participate in dual screen is that they couldn't watch it.
Right.
They had no access to it.
And that's super interesting because so I don't own a TV, for example, right? And there's a lot of interest around. We were talking about this in previous episodes about OTT campaigning, over the top, where you're putting ads into streaming services. There's a lot of free streaming services, Pluto, Hulu, that insert ads. And campaigns do that. They insert ads because you get good data on who's streaming versus who's watching television.
Digital ads.
And so with the national media filtering on TV, you can get the older voters who are still watching TV, and those are the ones who are more likely to vote in most cases. But there could have been a bigger push. But also, again, I haven't watched the debate, but from what I've seen from the commentary of people who are interested in European politics, they were unsatisfied with how the candidates answered. It's not the American model of the debate can make or break a campaign. Look at Marco Rubio.
Yeah, exactly.
The Rubio bot.
It's also, I think it's an attempt to make this more accessible to the public and to connect citizens with the president of the Commission, which is a sort of executive body of the European Union. At the same time, it's not quite, because there are debates within the European Union whether the system, the Spitzenkandidat, is an okay system. The parliament wants to have it because they want to exert democratic authority over the president of the executive. But in reality, at the moment, there's a conflict with the parliament and the European Council. And we're not going to go into all the details, but I want to say just this very system is a controversial system.
It's a controversial system, and I mean...
The Spitzenkandidaten system.
This is actually an interesting point. I'll think more about this as we move along in the series, is both what, for example, the guy I talked to doing the European campaigns, but also in some material that'll be coming out in the future on the podcast, is that, digital is one part of the overall press media releases, as they say, quote unquote, the bread and butter of what they do, right? And so if actually the parliament wanted to make this debate a salient thing, they're limited in terms of what they can do in terms of national filtering, but at the same time, there could have been a bigger push behind the debate. There could have been perhaps really hard questions. It could have been shared around the social media accounts. I don't know to what extent it was. It doesn't seem to me
it was announced,
like the
but
Spitzenkandidaten is really a push from any institution to bring it, basically.
It was definitely something that it's uncertain. It was a lot of uncertainty around it, and the national broadcasters had to decide whether or not they want to prioritize this, and they decided in some cases not to. In some cases they did, and they did get more engagement. I think in the Netherlands, because this one was taking place in Maastricht. I think there, because it was in the Netherlands, and because one of the leading candidates is a Dutchman, Frans Timmermans, then there's much more incentive.
Yet at the same time, this
so the role of national politics is not gone.
No, well, of course not. But I think this debate coincided with, I don't know what day it was on, but it coincided with Eurovision. So we saw some interesting from the 8,000 tweets that were that we collected. There was a lot of climate and green wave, which I think is interesting.
Yeah,
so
confirming
green
what
wave
we see.
Being a climate wave, kind of playing off the blue wave in the U.S. midterms. Progressive politics, sort of connection there. I think it's interesting. But yeah, just not, 8,000 tweets for a debate that, of course not 500 million people are going to tune into, but Twitter population, small in Europe, understandable, but 8,000 tweets. Man,
well, we'll
that's like
see
a bot.
Yeah, and none of this data is filtered, so bots may very well be some of these numbers that we present to you.
Game of Thrones, 17 million, something like that. Viewers.
That's a global phenomenon, literally.
Probably also more entertaining than that, well, maybe not this season, but previous
Very,
seasons.
very dire, as I understand, very gloomy. Prefer the European reality to the absolute bloody mess of the Game of Thrones. But yeah, this is kind of what we can talk about when it comes to the social media landscape surrounding this. There's definitely much more information and definitely more analysis to come in future papers and reports that hopefully both us and other researchers are about to generate. So again, stay tuned for more. But this is just like some hot off the press
initial impressions. I didn't think we'd go this long on the AP elections. If you're still tuning in by now, you're really interested in the topic, or I don't know, maybe you. Who knows? You have a long commute.
You're on the train. But anything else for the wrap up? Can we see if there's anything else?
I think we covered most of what we had planned, which is basically results, some data, thoughts on the campaign, transnational parties and lists.
Yes, we did.
We got into that. Eurosceptics, covered them. And
social media landscape, we did also talk about that. So I think we're about to say good night.
We'll wrap it up
from Washington D.C.
Or
good morning Europe.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much for tuning in, and stay tuned. Lots of pods coming your way. Actually, and I will plug a couple of pods that are coming up dealing specifically with European issues. One is the next one will be with an Italian campaigner digital campaigner for Matteo Renzi and the Party Democratico. So we're going to dig into Italian politics, which are huge, I think, in this election. We've got people doing Donald Tusk's social media account. We've got a study mapping migration narratives across Europe ahead of the election. So a lot of EU-focused stuff. We also got American campaigners coming on. So
something for everybody.
Really some great content coming up. I'm your host, Michael Becerra, signing off from Washington, D.C. See you next time.